And welcome to today's webinar, which is From Prediction to Reality, the Data Revolution Reshaping Wealth Tech in 2025. My name is Marie Swift with Impact Communications, and I'll be your host today for this insightful webinar, which features John O'Connell from the Oasis Group. Hi, John. We also have with us Don McHenry of ByAllAccounts, which is part of Morningstar Wealth. Hey, Don.
Hi,
and last but not least, we have Amar Ahluwalia. Let me say that again, Ahluwalia. I said I would not get that wrong, Amar, but it's Amar Ahluwalia of OneVest. And we're going to be talking about how 2024's bold predictions about data consolidation have become today's reality and what that means for your firm's future. But before we get started with our questions, I'd like to just quickly tell you a little bit more about each of our guests. So we'll start with you, Don. Don McHenry is Director of Product Management for ByAllAccounts, which is part of Morningstar Wealth. And Don leads the product strategy and execution for ByAllAccounts data aggregation, which simplifies financial data collection and management for wealth management firms. Amar Ahluwalia is co-founder and CEO of OneVest, a financial technology company on a mission to modernize wealth management. OneVest offers a modular platform that delivers a unified experience for clients and advisors, covering onboarding, client management, reporting, and more. And of course, you all should know, excuse me, I got choked up just even thinking about you, John. John O'Connell, the founder of Oasis Group, a great guy, also runs a leading consultancy for the wealth management industry, offering award-winning consulting services, industry-leading research, and compelling on-demand training. So thank you, gentlemen, all for being here today. And before we get into the questions, I just want to mention for the audience that we welcome your questions, but please, if you'll just put them into the chat or into the console here on the GoToWebinar control panel, we're going to hold those to the end because I have a number of great questions. I'm going to kick us off by starting with you, John, and let's get started. So a year ago, many predicted that data consolidation would become the defining challenge for wealth management firms. So as you look at the market today, how has that prediction played out? And what evidence are you seeing that confirms data consolidation has indeed become a reality?
So when you take a look at a lot of the larger wealth management firms, so take a step back. About a year ago, when we talked about this data becoming really more of the defining challenge for wealth management, one of the key issues that we looked at was the stovepipe nature of a lot of data, right? So you've got some data that's custodian data that's coming into probably your investment platform, and then you've got data that winds up coming in to your CRM. Now with the with AI note takers, a lot more data winds up getting into your CRM, right? So now that's becoming kind of a central hub for action items and things like that are coming in. So bringing all this data together, so you really do get a 360-degree view of your client, has been kind of the golden ticket that everyone keeps chasing after. I host a CTO think tank, at each one of the wealth management edge events, and then I wind up keeping in touch with a lot of these CTOs throughout the year. And when you take a look, 2 years ago, if we would have asked about data lakes, there'd be a handful of folks that had a data lake. Now, it seems to be for firms that are over $5 billion in assets under management in the RIA space, and then certainly for firms in the bank trust space, you're seeing data lakes becoming the reality. All of them have data lakes that they've already built. And they're leveraging those data lakes now to try to drive better data cleanliness throughout their applications. All of that is really setting the stage for being able to leverage that data in very interesting ways, whether that's analytics or whether that's using artificial intelligence on top of that data. Having that really clean data layer that includes the data from these disparate data sources is critical. And now we're seeing where, like I said, all of the leading firms have that data lake in place.
So Don, just let's go down that path a little bit longer. From your perspective at ByAllAccounts, aggregating data across multiple sources, what specific changes have you witnessed in client demands around data consolidation over the past year or so?
Yeah, and not just data lakes, data lake houses. That's a new one that we started hearing over the last year or so. So just dropping that note in there. But yeah, building on what John shared, consolidation isn't slowing down, and it's really exacerbated the data management complexity for wealth enterprises. Multi-custody, it's the norm now, but it introduces challenges because firms can't afford more pipes, more complexity. They want data that is standardized, that's auditable, that's dependable, really a single source of truth. And this is because most consolidators, they don't necessarily force custodian switch on day one, if ever, right? They run multi-custody out of the gate and then steer assets usually towards like a short preferred list over time. And you see this in the headlines, right? There's mergers are designed to avoid repapering. Networks are naming preferred custodians. Even large enterprises like an LPL that were historically, single custody, they're now rolling out multi-custody options. So for these enterprises, centralizing the custodial data becomes really mission critical because it enables that enterprise level oversight, enterprise level controls. They have to own the advisor data to supervise at scale, to substantiate performance and fees, and to support business intelligence and risk. And they have to do that without maintaining 5 different or more data models themselves. They also can't quite rely on getting the data from the portfolio platforms that their advisors use, which are critical for the advisor workflows, because like multi-custody itself, the data for those platforms is kind of spread across the ecosystem. Not all their advisors are using the same platforms necessarily. So that's adding additional intermediaries, slowing down access for the enterprise, and the standardization problem remains as well. So that's really where technology partners like us come in. The ask is for single source of truth, reliable, standardized, auditable data backed by SLAs and monitoring, really one backbone powering enterprise level compliance, billing, performance, and reporting as well. And that's kind of on the enterprise side. But now in respect to like the wealth technology vendors who are living in this world of consolidation, the real growth opportunity for them is the consolidator, is the enterprise segment. But selling to the enterprise, it's not the same as selling to an individual advisor. The bar's higher, the needs are more complex. So you're supporting more custodians per client. So vendors have to tackle kind of the same data sprawl that their enterprise customers face to manage that data in-house. And then that also means that they need to have access to all the required custodians, advisor-friendly onboarding that hides quirks across different custodians and gets really to first data fast in a way that can scale for the enterprise. So consolidation, it's not just about creating these bigger firms. It's really about creating bigger or it is creating bigger data obligations, and really the winners will turn this multi-custody sprawl into really a single data backbone that the enterprise can trust.
So we're talking about single source of truth, and Amar, I want to go to you next because I'm learning about this new term called universal orchestration. So OneVest positions itself as a platform that brings together disparate systems in the WealthTech ecosystem. And so I'd like to learn more about that term, universal orchestration, and what that means in practice and why it's so critical in today's wealth management firm.
Yeah, I'll kind of break this down into 2 components, right? What it actually means from a technology perspective and what it means in practice and kind of why it's important. If we think about it from a true technology lens, like it's a comprehensive approach to manage and automate complex distributed systems. The end goal of universal orchestration really is to create a unified view that can manage, automate workflows across different environments and different systems. With the impetus to kind of break down silos, enabling for greater efficiency and agility across an organization, right? So from a technology perspective, that's really what it is. Now, what this means in our world is when we think about universal orchestration, it's unifying multiple custodians, data feeds, book of records, third-party applications third-party coherent frameworks, workflows, and really bringing it down where the workflows from a compliance perspective and reporting run on a consistent source of truth. But a very critical component of this is the fact that the data movement itself has to be bilateral. The days of one-way data orchestration are long kind of behind us, and the future is really centered around kind of bilateral intelligent data flows and orchestration that over time will be more AI enabled. So you're starting to see a lot of that AI driven efficiency kind of within the flow itself. And really without orchestration, you kind of end up in that old school legacy experience that all of us dislike, which is firms end up with multiple portals, a swivel chair between systems, lots of swivel chairs between operations, advisors logging into 6 or 7 different systems, creating inefficiencies around experience, risk, data resilience. So that's all the stuff that we believe at OneVest needs to fall kind of within this universal orchestration framework, because that's where the industry is heading, and that's where you see kind of intelligent automation.
So recently, OneVest wrote about how technology is streamlining the M&A process, and I think that this is really interesting, particularly around digital onboarding. So Amar, let's stay with you for a minute. Can you elaborate on how data consolidation is reshaping firm acquisitions and advisor transitions?
Yeah, so this is near and dear to my heart as I'm a retired and reformed investment banker, and I used to have my own RIA firm. So this one is interesting in the sense that technology and data automation is so critical. You're seeing a lot of surge in deal making across the industry. The number of buyers has widened today compared to yesterday. Competition is way more fierce. But when you think about the M&A market and transitions, like one of your biggest pain points, historically speaking, has always been data portability. And really what that means is kind of consolidating household records, client goals, history across multiple platforms with the impetus to speed up kind of your post-deal integration. Historically speaking, that has been extremely siloed and very paper-driven. I was talking to somebody this morning, and they actually brought this topic up, and they're aware of a bunch of firms on the street that have been sending out manual paper packages as we start to think about like transition and advisor onboarding kind of within deal flow. And to me, the fact that we still have paper packages that exist is still mind-boggling. We're now in the digital age where papering really should be simplistic. Electronic devices are around us 24/7. We live in the age of Netflix. I can send you cash through Venmo in 3 seconds. So the facts that this still exists, again, is mind-boggling. So you need an experience that is super quick, easy to use, can upload bulk level data in a harmonized fashion, has the right compliance and governance processes kind of baked into it. And we as consumers and advisors and practitioners have the ability to sign docs really anywhere. You can receive e-docs electronically. You can use technology to send reminders. So repapering documentation should be easy now, and it should be a value add from an efficiency perspective to teams versus being a drag. At OneVest, we built a lot of tech around this with the impetus of driving those efficiencies. So when we think about the future, it's important for firms like OneVest and others to automate the client onboarding experience. That way you're reducing the account level timeframes and associated timelines that exist, from months down to days and weeks. And that really is the future, and that will start to drive a lot more M&A efficiency.
So just a reminder to our audience, if you have questions, please put them into the question box or into the chat, and we'll get to you momentarily. I've got 2 more questions. Don, I want to go to you next. We hear a lot about AI, of course. In fact, there's a whole conference devoted to AI now for practitioners. But you mentioned that AI's real impact isn't in flashy advisor tools, but in invisible infrastructure, powering data pipelines. Can you explain what that looks like in real practice and how it's different from the discrete AI applications that we hear about?
Yeah, and Amar kind of touched on this a moment ago, but to the point you made, initially we've seen AI step in to handle a lot of grunt work, right? Summarizing portfolios, pulling together meeting notes. That's powerful, right? Because all those activities, they don't just save advisors time, they help them, follow up faster, keep clients engaged, turn, conversations into action immediately. But AI is also being used for cost reduction across the board. So wealth tech firms, like ours, for instance, are using it to speed up onboarding, right? Improve data quality, to cut down on manual fixes. And I'll give you an example. So we, as an aggregator, there's many ways that we connect to financial account data. Wherever possible, we're going to use direct connections, feeds and APIs. But the reality is that, some assets, some very important assets for very important, customers, they're only available through screen scraping methods. And that's kind of the reality that we're living in for now. As you can imagine, like, this is the costliest part of us doing business, to have to acquire data this way. So we're using AI to help us dynamically diagnose, navigation related issues, eventually kind of working towards a self-healing model. So our focus here is, how do we run leaner? How do we run faster? So, in that respect, it's not just about the shiny new tools. AI is quietly kind of making the entire ecosystem run cheaper and smarter. That said, the shiny tools can be great as well, and they themselves are moving beyond just the simple productivity kind of enhancers. We're seeing, a whole wave of new platforms built with AI at their core. John and team, very familiar with this. Obviously, they published the AI WealthTech map. So if you're not familiar with that, I'd recommend checking it out. It's a great resource. I was at Future Proof a couple weeks ago, and it felt like every single demo was on the main stage was AI first. So they're coming to market with AI as the foundational value proposition. Everything from, client onboarding to portfolio construction to trading is all AI driven. And it's a good pitch, right? We'll see it in practice, but they'll face an uphill climb also to win, market share as new entrants. But they start with that built-in advantage. They can, integrate and deliver AI more naturally than incumbents. So it puts a lot of, good pressure on established platforms to keep pace. And overall, it kind of shifts the expectations in wealth tech from feature to outcomes in respect to AI.
So John, let's go back to you for a minute. Single pane of glass, this is a term that we've heard kicked around for years, but what is that single pane of glass, the ideal experience? What does that look like for advisors who are juggling multiple technology tools, and how close are we really to achieving that?
So I think that so a single pane of glass is really that 360-degree view of your client, right? Not only what are they holding, but what are their desires? What do they want to be invested in? How do they want their money to reflect their values? Bringing in behavioral finance capabilities alongside of what you would normally see with their investment management capability, or their investment portfolios that you would find in the investment platform, and what you see, for their contact information and action items that you would see in the CRM. So quite frankly, a single pane of glass is one ability to see everything about the client in one place. How close are we to achieving that? It's a little bit difficult to measure that at this point. And the reason I say that is you've got some incumbent vendors that are still very stovepiped in their data, right? I mean, there are still vendors in our space that don't even have APIs to integrate with other capabilities. So how do you get data into one position so that you can have this single pane of glass? Well, there are a couple of ways you could do it. Number one, you should be looking at being able to have your business processes and your data managed by you and not by a vendor, right? So that's the ability to have, for example, leveraging your workflows, not building your workflows in a proprietary technology, but having your workflows be extendable, that they can sit outside of a proprietary system. So that's number one. Number two, and by the way, that's fully achievable. If you look outside of wealth management, there's this concept called business process management and business process management notation. That has been around for 20 years. It's a well-oiled machine that's been out there outside of our space and being used by manufacturing companies, large-scale banking companies, financial services firms, for 20 years. So In that technology, you're not creating business processes in a proprietary system that are kind of thrown away. That's where you're creating a business process, you're measuring its efficiency, and then you're making changes to that business process to drive additional efficiency in it. Amazon can't deliver something to you next day or same day without having an extremely efficient process. So you're not going to be able to open an account in less than a week unless you actually have a process down on paper and then put that into a system and drive efficiency through that process. So when we start thinking of single pane of glass, I think the first stop that you need to think at is gathering the data, having a process around that data to make sure that it's clean, that it's integrated with the rest of the data sources. That's your first step to a single pane of glass. And I think that from a wealth management owner, if you're the owner of a wealth management firm, you need to become educated on asking good questions to your vendors about where are they going with their product roadmap around this. If they're not helping you to get there, then they may be someone you want to reconsider moving forward with in the future. But to the point that Amar made earlier, being able to have a good process around this, streamlining that, helps you with every part of your business, the M&A part of your business, the account opening part of your business, client satisfaction part of your business. And then to Don's point, when you look at what Morningstar does is they help you to standardize all the data that comes into your application or comes into your environment so that that data can be leveraged across different platforms from a single source. And I think both of those are critical for you to get to where we want to be with the single pane of glass.
Yeah, and I think you heard kind of both myself and Amar speak to the single pane of glass in what we were sharing, right? From our perspective, it's being that data backbone that can standardize all this disparate multi-custody data. Amar mentioned reducing the swivel chair effect and how his platform can do that. So that's that single pane of glass kind of theme throughout the everything that needs to be.
And maybe just to add, we've like in very adjacent industries, for example, capital markets, we've seen this single pane of glass exist for a very long time. So in a prior life, I built a capital markets tech company that turned into a unicorn. So again, very near and dear to my heart. And the notion of consolidated data, cleansed data in a single pane delivery is very common within the space. But yet we haven't necessarily seen that in the wealth management space. Kind of delivered at mass scale and mass capacity. But I think the key notion here, it starts with the data. If the data is not good, the data is not clean, you don't have the right data schematics or data structures, you're not going to get the right level of output that you're looking for. So it all comes down to how great your data schematics and your structures are as technology vendors overall, and then how quickly you can look to effectively drive either real-time delivery and automation, or bringing it together in a right cohesive manner that can actually deliver good output.
So we're talking about data consolidation, and it seems like a primary focus, if not the primary focus right now. I'd like to hear from each of you. As you look towards 2026, what predictions do you have? What will the next major shift be? Will it still be data consolidation or something else? Who wants to go first?
All right, I'll jump in.
Yeah, go for it.
If you look, 2025 was kind of the year of the note taker, right? 2026 is going to probably be more around document management and document interrogation. So you'll see a bunch of firms beginning to pop up that enable you to interrogate documents and then leverage the data from those documents. So how do I get data out of a trust document, an alternative investment document, or an estate plan? You're going to see more and more of that capability. What's coming in 2027 are going to be AI agents. Now, you've got larger enterprises that are beginning to build that now, but the cost of that is probably still in the larger enterprise space. You're going to see those costs begin to come down when more and more people become adept at this technology and more people become proficient in being able to create agents rapidly. So 2027 is going to be the year of agents. Now, what does an agent actually do? Well, it's going to process, it's going to run through a business process with the information that you've given it, and it's going to do it super fast, right? Hopefully without a lot of human intervention. There'll be humans in the loop to validate certain things that happen. But if you take, a simple process like account opening, I'm going to get the information from my from my potential client or my new client. I'm going to get information that I need to do the KYC process. So they're going to send me information like a driver's license and things like that. I can use AI to interrogate that, pull out the data, use that data to populate what needs to happen to open the account at the custodian. That can happen. That happens today. It's just done primarily by a human being. AI will be able to make that go away, and it's going to make it much, much faster. Where's the rub? If the data is not good, or if the process isn't well defined, AI is going to try to fill in the blanks of your process, which means that if you don't have a really good process and really good data, you're not really going to be able to take advantage of AI agents, because they're just going to get you to the wrong answer faster than the right answer, right? If you can imagine, an AI agent doesn't sleep. It's going to work 24/7. You send it information, it's going to process it without taking a vacation day. If it processes it incorrectly because you have a gap in your business process, or the data you sent it is incorrect, it's just going to do it really fast. So getting the data aligned, getting your processes aligned is what's going to help you to take advantage of the agents that are coming. And then even beyond agents, we have digital workers, which are going to string together a variety of agents to actually do a job. So you've got to, if you're listening to this webinar today, the concept of getting your data aligned and getting your business processes aligned is what's going to position your firm to take advantage of what's coming down the pipe from a technology perspective. If you don't do it today, you're just going to be a lot later to that party when the party happens. So my prediction is agents are coming, they're coming really, really quickly, and you need to start preparing yourself for that next wave of technology.
Maybe just adding to that, like I think 2025 was interesting, where you just saw a lot of data restructuring and data process mapping, or re-engineering as a whole. I think you'll continue to keep seeing that trend heading into 2026, where like data consolidation remains a baseline, and if you can't consolidate data in a very clean, efficient manner, then again, you can't gain the insights and the outputs that you want to achieve as a very fast-growing firm. But as you start to kind of head out of 26 and into 27, it starts to get super interesting, right? So we believe that the next frontier is really around kind of real-time personalization. That real-time personalization is really across multiple personas. Historically, you've always, or many firms have always talked about personalization at the end client level. But the reality is that you have many personas and many stakeholders involved in the entire, let's just call it, facilitation of user journey. That means mass real-time personalization for the client, for the advisor, for the home office, for the administrator, for the compliance support worker. And again, I think you're starting to see a lot of those coming trends that are around the corner. Where it starts to get, again, super intriguing is around John's comments around agents. Now, if we look back to the last 3 to 4 years of AI, right? So AI is no longer in the first inning. We are going first, second, third, fourth, really, really fast. And the adoption of agents inside of more comprehensive workflows is becoming extremely apparent and very engraved. So by the time you get to mass degree personalization, to John's point, you're going to have 24/7 agents running all the time, where you're going to get much more efficiency within your overall, let's call it end-to-end process delivery. But it all starts with the data. If you can't figure out your data structures now, you will get left behind. This also impacts M&A. You're seeing a growing trend in firms that just have better data processes, better technology processes, lead potentially to higher multiples. If you have legacy process and legacy data structures, you can't really derive any indicative level insights, which limits your ability to drive expanded levels of growth. And again, we are all aligned and kind of thinking on a growth mindset. So in order for you to grow faster, in order for you to hit multiple targets and levels, in order for you to bring in more clients, service them better, you just have to have better data. And the future looks extremely awesome and amazing in terms of the true insights and indicative level outputs that you're going to get from the value of AI.
Yeah, and I'll just really quickly piggyback on what Amar said there. In that single data backbone is now going to be more of a board level kind of top-down priority for enterprises. This is a little biased, prediction coming from the aggregator, right? But rather than the enterprise level data layers being more kind of projects that were undertaken by these enterprises, they're going to get more funding directly from leadership, and that's where we'll see cutting down on intermediaries, with enterprises really trying to focus more on first party or near first party data contracts.
Okay, if there's nothing more, gentlemen, I think we'll go to audience Q&A. Any final words before we do that? All right, let's do it. Colin, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we have a few questions here. I'll just start with the first one and work my way down. So for smaller RIAs with limited technology budgets, what's the most cost-effective way to begin modernizing their data infrastructure?
So go ahead, Amar. You go first.
Yeah. So look, I would say don't rock the boat, right? Don't try to rip and replace overnight. Start with tangible problems that you can derive tangible solutions to, and really that starts with like modular based applications. So again, don't look to solve your problems overnight. Start with one solution that can integrate by APIs, avoid large monolithic systems and overhauls, avoid legacy platforms, do your due diligence on the data. That's going to be extremely important, and you need to be able to kind of focus on where the client will win, where the advisor will win, and where you generate the most level of kind of operational efficiency. For example, digital onboarding that has straight through process.
Don, you want to weigh in?
I mean, those are fantastic words from Amar. I would say, when selecting vendors and technology, just making sure that they have, the pipes available for your data. And we see a lot in working with wealth technology platforms that, they have to turn away business. They have to tell advisors, no, or hey, check back in 6 months, because, it takes a long time to be able to catch up to all of the data acquisition demands of the market.
I'm going to give a more of a concrete example if I can, which is, think about the data that is not in sync normally for many people, right? So let's take something as simple as the client's address. The custodian may have one address for the client. If you deal with insurance within your practice, there may be another address on the insurance policies for the client. The client may have a third address in your CRM, and they may have a fourth address sitting on an estate plan. The estate plan was created years ago, so they didn't update the address after they moved. You've got the right address in the CRM. The custodian may have the incorrect address. Start with something small. Pick a use case. Talk to your operations team, because they'll know where the data problems are, okay? Pick one use case and say, okay, we're gonna solve for this first. How do we do it? You're going to learn a lot. You're going to create data reconciliation reporting across these disparate systems. You're going to learn that your business process probably needs to change. If the advisor meets with the client and the client has changed their address, how are you capturing that coming out of the meeting and throwing that in a business process that says, let me update that address everywhere? So you're going to learn a lot about your business processes. You're going to learn about data reconciliation reporting. And you're going to begin understanding this concept of a data steward. Who in the organization is going to be accountable now to make sure that that data is in sync forever moving forward? Those are 3 core concepts to get your data aligned. A data steward who's accountable for all this, a process to make sure that your data stays aligned, okay, and reconciliation and reporting to figure out when it's not. Those 3 core concepts will put you on a really good path forward. Once you've solved for one use case, now you've got a repeatable roadmap. You know what you need. You need these 3 things to make sure that everything stays aligned. Pick your next data element, and then your next data element after that. For smaller firms who don't necessarily or don't know where to start with putting together a data lake, putting together a data lake is probably going to be overwhelming for you. Get some really great hygiene around data stewardship and around data cleanliness. And you're well on your way to understanding every concept that you need to put together a strong data lake moving forward.
All right, Colin, any more questions?
Yeah, I think this one will kind of piggyback great after what John just said. When you're pulling information from multiple custodians, CRMs, and held away accounts, how do you handle discrepancies or conflicts in the data? What processes should firms have in place to maintain data integrity?
So I'll hit it first. I think part of what you want to have is that role of the data steward, right? You're going to get data from multiple custodians. You've got CRM data, you've held away account data, and Don, I would love to get your perspective on this right after. But really putting together a process that says, here's how we're going to handle these data anomalies is, I think, critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And we face that day to day, and our objective and goal for our customers is to provide that standardization, right? And it's not always easy, and there's always going to be nuances and quirks, but wherever you can work through a standardized pipeline and reduce kind of the amount of effort you have in working with many data sources is certainly place to start.
And maybe just add to that, like you probably have to build a fair amount of like automated reconciliation rules where you can catch exceptions of reporting and discrepancies like very early. And to John's point, like governance is super key. You have to have a governance framework. That's why the data stewardship process is extremely important. And without that, like you're probably just going to have breaks in process.
And one last piece I'll add is take a look at your data provider, right? If you're working, here's the way I like to describe things. If you're working with 3 different custodians and you're the one handling those 3 different custodian feeds on a daily basis, you're the only one that the data reconciliation is falling upon, right? If you don't want to do that, take a look at some of the data providers and say, can I get all 3 of my custodian feeds from one place where it's already cleansed and it's already put together, right? Like ByAllAccounts does that type of stuff. That you may want to consider that, because a lot of people, I think, say, well, I'm going to get this piece of data from this source, I'm going to get that piece of data from that source. At the end of the day, if you're getting data from multiple sources, look in the mirror. You're the one reconciling it all. And if you don't have the business processes around that, there's really one person to blame. Look in the mirror. You're the one reconciling it all.
Excellent. All right, another one here that just came in. Do you foresee a future where some of these more vertically, i.e. all-in-one integrated tech solutions make it more difficult for RIAs to not only own their data, but also leverage it in the ways discussed on this call?
Well, that's a loaded question. Who wants to take that one first?
I mean, I kind of spoke to this from like the enterprise perspective, not the individual RIA. But where the enterprise has multi-custody sprawl, they can't rely again on maybe connecting with each of their advisors' platforms to get the data, because there's latency issues, there's standardization across those platforms, and bringing the data in-house kind of addresses some of those concerns and problems, and allows you to have more control directly yourself over the data. Again, that's more kind of enterprise level.
I can speak to this from our perspective. Like we're a pretty robust system that has lots of solutions from an end-to-end delivery perspective, but we believe in modularity, and we believe in kind of an open data infrastructure and schematic. So we enable all of our clients at their will whenever they want to export their data through APIs or through open frameworks. So our opinion is that it's in everybody's best interest if they actually have access to their data, and closed environments again are not the future. At the end of the day, like data empowers everything. So it's a futuristic concept that open data frameworks within all-in-one systems should exist. And again, that comes down to your overall kind of infrastructure-based delivery.
Yeah, I think I would look at your vendors, right? If your vendor does not have an open data architecture, you should be concerned. And if you take a look at some of the leading vendors in our space, look at like an Advisor 360, Orion, Tamarack, they're enabling data replication out of their solutions into, for example, Snowflake and Redshift, which gives you the ability to leverage that data any way you want, or the ability to use that data lake or data lakehouse as really a set of middleware that can connect all of your applications together in one place. So for a whole lot of reasons, I think that you want to move more towards open architecture. Things with artificial intelligence are moving so incredibly fast, it's difficult to look at 5 years from now and say, where are we going to be? But if you look at just the history of computer science, it's been around for a heck of a long time. Open architectures always win. It's like we go through these cyclical phases where you have closed architectures. Just ask SAP and Bond and Oracle Financials, right? And I worked at Oracle. Those architectures used to be closed and now they're open. Why? Because closed architectures don't survive over long periods of time. People want access to the data, they want data portability, they want to be able to do what they need to with their data. They're entering it in, it's their data. So for any solution today that does not enable that kind of open architecture, I'm concerned for those solutions at this point. And by the way, it's going to be much more difficult to connect anything to that moving forward. Artificial intelligence relies on data. Data is literally the fuel that AI burns. And the way it burns it is your business processes. That guides the flame so that you don't just burn your entire house down. So how do you do that? You've got to have, that data needs to be accessible. The fuel needs to be there for AI to really power the next generation of your business. And if that data is locked up in a proprietary system that you don't have access to, it's going to be one more hindrance in your ability to be part of this next generation of growth around data architectures and the next generation of growth of your firm.
And maybe just adding to that, like, think of it as a checklist, right? So open architecture, a must. Common APIs, a must. If they're custom APIs, don't bother. Having developer portals and application portals that can access data and API delivery in a more simplistic manner, extremely important. Like if you're not capturing those components as we start to think about like forward-looking and futuristic tech, which is table stakes, then you probably want to look at your diligence in very different ways. It's kind of what I'm saying.
Excellent. Yeah, I have one last question here from the audience. For firms currently using legacy systems that may be 5 to 10 years old, what's the business case for modernization? How do you quantify ROI on data consolidation and technology investments, and what metrics should firms track to measure success beyond just operational efficiency?
I can jump in here. Like we've seen this with a lot of our clients, and like I think you kind of answered your own question to a certain extent. You have to have quantifiable ROI, and that can mean many things to many different firms. But at a broad basis, that can be fewer manual processes, reduced compliance risk, faster advisor productivity, a greater or a reduced level of NIGOs, a greater level to drive advisor onboarding and advisor transition, the ability to fund accounts in a matter of minutes versus days, documentation process efficiency. Again, like the list can go on, but it's important to track these metrics from a delivery standpoint. So there's ways to derive this. You just have to be very clear in terms of kind of what ROI means to the firm.
I'll just add one other point that I would build upon really what Amar said. You know, I'm a woodworker, so there's an old saying in woodworking: measure twice and cut once, right? If you're not measuring the current level of effort around whatever business process it is, account opening, preparing for an annual meeting, whatever. If you're not measuring that before you start taking a look at another solution, you're never going to be able to measure it later and figure out what your return on investment was. So you got to measure up front, what's the amount of time that I'm doing on these business processes? What is the level of inefficiency that I have with my legacy platform? That could be as easy as interviewing your team and saying, okay, what are the workarounds that you currently have in place today, and how long does it take to do those workarounds? That at least gives you the baseline. Then when you go to review a more modern solution, bring some of those workarounds to the more modern solution. Ask for the custom demo. Hey, my team does this today manually. How do you automate that in your platform moving forward? If they can demonstrate the modernization, then it's easy for you to measure the ROI after you've implemented. If you go to them with, hey, here's all the workarounds and manual processes I do today, show me how you do those in your new flashy system, and they're not able to demonstrate that, you're probably not going to get the ROI you want. So you've got to measure in the beginning, use that in your evaluation process, and then measure at the end, measure twice. And that will tell you what your ROI is. So
can't manage what you can't measure.
Can't manage what you can't measure.
All right, anybody else? Final words of wisdom? Otherwise, we'll wrap up. Okay, well, thank you so much, gentlemen. I've learned a lot, and I hope our audience did too. Reminder that this is just one of many great webinars in a series that's brought to you by Oasis Group, and you can visit the Oasis Group site for more research, more tools, that AI tech map that we talked about earlier, and the recording will be forthcoming to those who signed up for it to be here today or to register if you couldn't make it. So thank you again, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.